That leaves us with 2 at-large spots, and there are 3 teams that can get those at-large spots. UConn is one of them, UMass is the second, Augustana is the third.
Welcome to USCHO's Bracketology Xtra for Monday, March 16th, 2026. We're sponsored by the NCAA Division I Men's Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefsker alongside our bracketologist, Jim Connolly. And this has been fun this year to look at it, and we're coming down to the wire. I would not be surprised if we see something a lot like this on Saturday night, but here's the bracket as it stands right now. Number 1 overall Michigan is in Albany with Providence, Cornell, and Bentley, which is the placeholder for Atlantic hockey. In Loveland, Colorado, number 4 overall Michigan is with Denver, the host school, Wisconsin, and St. Thomas. In Sioux Falls, number 2 overall North Dakota is with Dartmouth, Penn State, and Connecticut. And in Worcester, number 3 overall Michigan State is joined by Minnesota, Duluth, Quinnipiac, and Massachusetts. The last team in as an at-large was UConn, the first team out, Augustana. And we'll have to talk a little bit about the CCHA and what's coming up, their loss to St. Thomas. But first of all, why don't we talk about how you built this? Again, it seems like it was pretty straightforward this time.
And this one wasn't, just straightforward. You didn't have to make any changes, put 1 through 16 in and put it out. But it's really close. The only interconference matchup we had was an ECAC matchup in the 8-9 slot between Dartmouth and Cornell. So all I did was swap Providence and Dartmouth. That gave me a pretty clean bracket. The one thing I had at that point was I had in Loveland, I had UMass, and in Worcester, I had St. Thomas. They're both 4 seeds in those various regions. I just swapped them. It gets St. Thomas, leaves them out west. There's no need for them to fly all the way to Worcester. In UMass, they can hop on a bus, drive down the Mass Pike, and they'll be in Worcester. So I like this bracket the best of all the alternatives you could have. You don't have to swap Providence and Dartmouth. You could have made the swap in the 9 through 12 band as well. But I felt once I swapped Providence and Dartmouth, that gave me a really clean bracket from there on.
Well, it's not just for attendance. It's also something for the fans to be able to travel to. I mean, St. Thomas to Loveland, it's not a hop, skip, and a jump, but it's a lot easier to get there than it is to Worcester. And UMass going all the way out to Colorado instead of, a few exits down the pike makes a lot of sense too. It seems like something that the committee would be happy to do. They want to keep the bracket with integrity, but when you're swapping 4th seeds in regions like that, that doesn't seem like a huge impact.
Yeah, as long as the 4th seed is a top 15 team in the NPI, I don't mind doing it. If you're talking about taking one of the Atlantic hockey rep, either Sacred Heart or Bentley, they'll play in the finals on Saturdays. That's a team that's further down the NPI, at least in the mid-20s. So I wouldn't want them involved in such a swap. But you're talking about swapping teams that are, fractions apart in the NPI. I totally would do this. The committee, I think, would 100% do this.
So bottom line, you've made one fix for integrity because you don't have an interconference matchup, one little tweak for attendance, and then everything else just fell in just fine for you.
That's it. It was very simple, I thought, this week.
Well, so the big takeaway from the weekend, it seems, had to do with Hockey East. It was looking like maybe 1 or 2 teams getting in. Now there are 3 inside the bubble. And the way things played out really helped that league.
It did. It's interesting. They walked into last weekend guaranteed just 1 spot. Providence was the only team in. Interestingly, Providence loses in overtime to Merrimack. They're now out of the Hockey East tournament, which means the Hockey East champion will get in the field as well. So Hockey East now guaranteed 2 teams in the field. The math is what is going to become interesting now, and we'll get into it in the next segment. But when we look at UMass and UConn, they've both reached the Garden. They won't play each other, so both teams could get to the Hockey East Championship. And I think if they both get there, it's going to be a pretty good chance that both of them could be safe as long as we don't have bid stealers. We're going to get into the whole what a bid stealer is and who are the remaining bid stealers. But I think for Hockey East, they probably took the best step forward. There wasn't a lot of room for a Big Ten or an NCHC team to move up in terms of moving inside the bubble for at-large. But Hockey East had that opportunity. That's the league that seized it. The CCHA, they might have lost the most because they looked like they were getting in at least 2 teams, maybe 3. Now they max out at 2. Augustana is the outlier because they lost. And then either St. Thomas or Minnesota State is going to be the winner of that CCHA final as the only guaranteed team from that league. So it was a good weekend for Steve Metcalf and Hockey East.
And it was a good weekend for Worcester if UMass ends up in that regional.
You're right there, Ed, too. I think getting 2 teams in, it just protects the Eastern region. So if you get UMass and UConn both in the field, you get one ends up, I think the way we had it currently, you ended up with UMass in Worcester. Connecticut right now is in Sioux Falls. There's a chance that maybe they get back to Albany if they get in. That's one of those tweaks too. The whole thing is you're getting a better balance between Eastern and Western teams, which could help the attendance in all 4 buildings.
Well, let's get to the fun part. And we didn't promise there wouldn't be math because there's going to be a little bit of math. But it's the cleanest way for us to explain what's going on. So, we've talked about, well, there's 16 positions in the tournament, and that's true. But right now, 11 of those are pretty well taken up. I mean, they're clinched. And Atlantic Hockey is going to get number 16. So you got Wisconsin in there on the edge, almost a lock, but not 100%. So you're really down to 2 or maybe 3 teams battling over those last couple of positions. So that's going to be fun. So why don't we start out with Wisconsin? They're not 100%, but they're pretty safe, right?
They are. They're 95%. They do not control any destiny because they don't play this weekend. They are the team that has to avoid bid stealers, most of anybody. They need the winners in the ECAC, Hockey East, and Big Ten to not be bid stealers. Who can steal bids right now? In the ECAC, Princeton and Clarkson both qualified as bid stealers. So if they were to win the ECAC, the cut line will move up 1. Hockey East, Boston College, and Merrimack, those are your bid stealers. Big Ten, Ohio State. So if those 5 teams, out of those 5 teams, if 3 of those 3 conferences all are won by bid stealers, Wisconsin is out. So basically, when you look at it, the Big Ten will still get the same number of teams in. It would just be Ohio State would be taking Wisconsin's place. Now, I moved down a little bit further into the bubble. That now accounts for 13 teams. When you think of 1 through 11, now we're going to add Wisconsin. Let's just say that they're in for the sake of this exercise. There's 12. Atlantic Hockey, there's 13. The CCHA champion, I just mentioned it, either St. Thomas or Minnesota State. The winner of that game, they will be in, but the loser, their season is over. That leaves us with 2 at-large spots, and there are 3 teams that can get those at-large spots. UConn is one of them, UMass is the second, Augustana is the third. 2 of those teams play this weekend, UMass and UConn, they both play. Augustana does not. So here are the percentages for Augustana, UMass, and UConn. Without playing, Augustana to get in as an at-large, 43%. So 43% of the time they will get in. UMass, 35% as an at-large. They still have chances that they could win the Hockey East Championship, so their actual overall hopes are a little higher. UConn, just 19% as an at-large. They could still win the Hockey East Championship. I want to say that if UConn plays UMass in the Hockey East finals, they'd both be in, but I can't guarantee that. And that's going to bring me to the last point here. There's a caveat. This is the first year of the NPI. Everybody has calculators. Playoff Status has one. USCHO will have one. There are other sites that have them out there. We all believe our math is correct, but because no one has ever had to run the NPI math entirely, and the only day that you can technically run it perfectly is when you have all game situations accounted for, we don't know that it's all going to be perfect. So I want you to take all of these odds with a grain of salt. We think they're close, but I want you to take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it's been the case right along. We're still trying to learn the nuances of it, but the math is far more than anybody can keep in their head. At least anybody I know. Maybe there's some PhDs tucked away somewhere who can do it. But really, when you look at what those three teams need, BC and UConn and Augustana, they're just sitting back and watching. They need things to go their way. But UConn, they got to get to the championship, right? And UMass may still get in even if they have a stumble against Merrimack.
I think UConn has to get to the final. That is the math I see so far. UMass, I think there will be some chances if there are no bid stealers that they could get in if they were to lose on Friday. But I want to say it's much easier if they get to the championship game on Saturday. And then you said it, Augustana, sit back, wait and see. They don't have any ability to control destiny this weekend. I'm sure it's a much more tense situation out there.
So why don't we go back through the list? I'll hit them up. And if you want to throw in some comments here, Atlantic Hockey, we've known this all along. It's either going to be Bentley or Sacred Heart. They have their final at Bentley on Saturday. The Big Ten, Ohio State versus Michigan. And as you mentioned, Ohio State could bump Wisconsin. Ohio State with a big upset to get to the final on Saturday at Yost. That's one of those things that happens with the automatic qualifier. I think the most interesting one, or one of the most interesting ones, again, is Minnesota State and St. Thomas. It's interesting that whichever one of them loses is probably out, but that may open things up for Augustana.
Whichever one loses, I think, is definitely out from what I can tell by the math. It will give hope to Augustana. I can't tell if one team winning over the other would help Augustana. That's a little bit more advanced math that we haven't had a chance to run the numbers on.
ECAC, we've been talking right along about upsets in Lake Placid. Well, the upset happened in Hamden, Connecticut, with Clarkson sweeping Quinnipiac on the road. But if Princeton and Clarkson were to advance to the championship game, then we'd already know one spot was gone even before that happens. But if either one of them, Princeton past Cornell or Clarkson versus Dartmouth, happens on Friday, then you have a pretty good opportunity for another team to get bumped.
Yeah, so that's what we have to watch. And I know you're going to get to Hockey East next, but it's the same scenario there. You have Boston College and Merrimack both needing to win to get in. They could potentially face off in the final. So after Friday, there's a chance we will know exactly where the cut line is going to fall.
BC UConn, that's kind of a must-win for both. Well, it is definitely a must-win for Boston College, but most likely a must-win for UConn. And then Merrimack versus UMass. Probably a loss doesn't knock UMass out, but boy, that would be some kind of an upset for Merrimack right there. And then the NCHC. It was interesting that a loss to Minnesota Duluth really didn't harm the Fighting Hawks that much, maybe in pride. And it was a squeaker for Denver to advance. So that should be an interesting one, but it'll be a league championship happening at Magnus instead of Engel.
Maybe that was a little bit of an upset this weekend, and certainly opened a few eyes. It does move the location of the championship game. I think for North Dakota, the biggest championship is still ahead of them.
Well, that's going to kind of sum things up. But again, the same caveat. This is year one of the NPI replacing the Paraguay. almost grew up with the pairwise, I guess, and really had an understanding of how that would all work. And you could see head to head and things move in there. But now we've got multiple decimal points being calculated with lots of moving parts. So right now, this isn't 100%. This is pretty close and kind of our hunch. But really, you got 3 teams chasing 2 seats at large, if those at large seats even remain.
I mean, this weekend is huge. It always is. And I feel like the Friday night semifinals in both Lake Placid and at the TD Garden, they're going to feel like almost NCAA regionals, mini regionals, with teams trying to keep their seasons alive.
Well, we'll keep you updated on that, and we'll have a little bit later in the week our weekend review pod. This has been sponsored by the NCAA Division I Men's Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas, ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. We're at youtube.com/USCHO. For Jim Connolly, I'm Ed Trefsker, and this has been USCHO's Bracketology Extra.